Good evening and welcome to tonight's edition of The Probe. We know that Article 276, Clause 1, stipulates that a chief shall not take part in active party politics, and any chief wishing to do so and seeking election to Parliament shall abdicate his tool or skin. Well, this is what the 1992 Constitution of Ghana says. But at the height of political campaigning, this is what we saw.
Anyone who disagrees, I will turn into a serial caller. If the person defeats me in such a debate, I will abdicate.
Well, the Supreme Court sought to cure this, and on Friday, in a unanimous decision, the court declared that it is unconstitutional for chiefs to endorse candidates or their party. The court, however, pointed out that chiefs praising or lauding the policy of a candidate is permissible. But will this ruling cure the confusion that otherwise existed? Is this less cryptic, less ambiguous and clearer? I'll be joined by the finest brains on this matter. We dig into it on The Probe tonight, live on Joy News. We are live on Joy 99.7 FM and affiliates across the country. We're on myjoyonline.com, on DSTV channel. We're on 421, Go TV is 125. But after this, a legal correspondent, Joseph Akable, will set the tone for the discussion with a recap of events from the Supreme Court. After this quick turnaround, I am Emefa Apawu, and this is The Probe. You're welcome.
Ghana's constitution bans chiefs from participating in active party politics. Chiefs wishing to do so and also to contest political office are required to abdicate the stool or skin they occupy. What constitutes active party politics has been a subject of spirited public debate, with some insisting chiefs' endorsement of parties, candidates and their policies is within the law. Despite the uncertainty, chiefs have not shied away from speaking. The work you are doing here, I didn't see Kwame Nkrumah, but from 1979 till date, no one can say he has worked more than you. Anyone who disagrees, I will turn into a serial caller, and if that person defeats me in such a debate, I will abdicate. Some have had to even at times clarify their comments. You cannot say something against him. In the same way, your younger brother who has left also came. You can't say something against him.
As a baby, 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 they caught to internet issue. If
each person is. Various experts have raised concerns as well.
If the House of Chiefs cannot manage their own people, they are supported by God, they give them big cars and all that. And I understand some persons. You see, so it's a very difficult situation.
Legal practitioner Elom Kwame Goni took the matter to the Apex Court, seeking its interpretation. The court, in its judgment, authored by Justice Emmanuel Yoni Kulendi, laid down what comments are lawful and which ones are unconstitutional. The court said statements that praise a policy or program or a project of a candidate or a party are permissible endorsements. On the other hand, those other statements where a chief is heard endorsing the person of the candidate or his party or urging voters to vote for them are the kind of, quote, taking sides, end quote, in a partisan political contest that the Constitution disapproves of. The court noted that chiefs are not barred from expressing their opinions about matters that are subject to public debate and discussion. This, he added, strikes the right balance between the rights of chiefs and reasonable expectations associated with their role and the public interest concerns that animated the said constitutional provisions.
That's Legal Affairs correspondent Joseph Akable giving us a recap of everything that happened in terms of the Supreme Court's judgment on Friday. Let me bring in my guest for tonight. I will take thoughts on this. I'll have Professor Kofi Ejekum, is a linguistics and politics expert from the University of Ghana. I also have, thankfully, we are privileged to be joined via phone by Togbi Teferehodo. He's the Paramount Chief Amfuega Traditional Area and President of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs. He joins us via phone as well. Kojo Apiejetua, Associate Professor, School of Law, University of Ghana, Legon, also will join us via Zoom. Safu Kantanka is a monarchical historian, will also join us via phone. And Dr. Kwame Asante is a senior lecturer, Department of Political Science Department, also Center for European Studies, University of Ghana, Legon, also joins us via Zoom. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time this evening here on The Probe. I'll start with Togbi Teferehodo, for obvious reasons, President of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs. Thank you so much for joining us via phone. We're grateful for your time here on The Probe. So let's get an understanding. I'm sure this particular ruling from the Supreme Court has been brought to the attention of the Regional House of Chiefs and the National House of Chiefs for that matter. But the concern that at least we've heard people raise is that what really will be the understanding of the law when it comes to chiefs and your members, such that we still have some chiefs endorsing candidates in spite of what the Constitution stipulates?
Thank you very much. I think the position hitherto was that the provisions of Article 276 were kind of ambiguous. So we all couldn't draw the line as to what was constitutional or otherwise. I think with the ruling by the Supreme Court, it has settled the dust which has hitherto clouded this whole issue. I think the judgment was a very well-reasoned one. It took the historical perspective in terms of chieftaincy into consideration before arriving at this decision. For me, that the judgment actually now delimits what chiefs can do or cannot do, and as far as participation in active party politics is concerned. You yourself have said it already. I think the line has not been clearly drawn up. And I think members of the various houses of chiefs have been encouraged to read this judgment and educate themselves so they know where to draw the line. Some situations which necessitate them having to interact with politicians at those kind of levels. Yeah. So basically, I think it was a seminal decision by the Supreme Court which ought to be commended.
Okay, but does it really provide that clarity is the concern? Because the court on one hand talks about how it's unconstitutional for chiefs to endorse a candidate or a party. But the court, however, gives that permission because as agents of change, you also have freedom of free expression amongst others. But you are allowed to praise or laud the policy of a candidate or a government for that matter. How then are we able to draw that line? Because you lead a number of people. If you are lauding the policy of the candidates and the government for that matter, is that not to a large extent endorsing their candidature?
I don't really think so, because if you look at the interpretative context in which the Supreme Court has sought to delimit this whole matter, it is a situation where, you know, as a chief, you are head of people from all kinds of political leanings. You see the point? So yes, you can criticize or encourage a politician as to the kind of things that he is doing, but then where the Supreme Court says you touching or going to uncharted waters when you virtually endorse his candidature and tell your citizens to vote for him, and I think that goes overboard. If you see what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Yes, you have every right to laud him with the projects that he's working in the community. Yes, why not? But what the Supreme Court is saying is, considering the peculiar position of chief, you will be going overboard if you went ahead to say, oh, this is the candidate, I think he's good, give him another term, I'm going to get my people to vote for me. you would have been going overboard. And I think right now, I think it is clear. I don't think it has been of any further ambiguities at all.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yes.
Okay. Thankfully for you, that clarity has been provided. That a cryptic and ambiguous situation has been cured. But as a leader, at least you lead the Volta Regional House of Chiefs. So maybe we can talk about the Volta region and the role that you're hoping to play, because we had this in the Constitution all along. Active politics was unconstitutional from day one, but we had it happening. So going forward, now that you're commending the Supreme Court for this clarity that is provided, what role specifically would you say you're going to be playing to ensure that all members conform? Because we are getting into the active season shortly.
Exactly. I think first of all, it will be a question of more and more education as to the various scenarios which could come up and what it amounts to, as to whether or not that amounts to active politics or it is not. So the education is first and foremost what we should intensify. And then, of course, people are in the habit of throwing these things overboard, get excited about the fact that the politician is in my community. Then, that's when they go off tangent, say all kinds of things. So chiefs, as leaders of communities, need to be guarded in what they say to politicians. And I think that is what the Supreme Court is saying in so many words. Don't go overboard telling your subject, oh, this is a good candidate, support this one, don't mind this one, because this one has brought goodies to us, therefore endorse him and vote. No. As a chief, you have people from various political divides. Why would you be saying things like that? So if you say, what happens to those who don't support your candidate but are your citizens? You bring unnecessary conflict. I think that is the essence of this whole thing. And for me, the line has been very clearly drawn. So now, chiefs will realize the fact that you are superintending over various political leanings. And so you must be guarded in as far as what you say or you do not say when it comes to all these matters of politics. I think that is just the essence of the whole judgment of the Supreme Court.
In wrapping up with you, you've talked about the education that you're hoping to provide at that level, much more education for your members. But really, is there some form of action that amongst yourself, that kind of peer action that you're hoping to take if some of your members do not toe that particular line?
Yes, I think we would have to. You see that the Constitution doesn't prescribe any kind of penalties when those articles are increased by. But then we should have our own internal mechanism whereby at least we are able to quietly maybe either sanction or advise the subject not to engage in matters such as that. I don't think people are asking. Well, there are no penalties. I don't think necessarily there should be penalties. I mean, things are supposed to be at a certain level in the society, and therefore should be able to discipline themselves. It shouldn't be a situation where you get the Supreme Court saying it and drawing the line very clearly, and yet you think that because of your party affiliation you could go overboard. Then it means you're not a disciplined leader. So for me, it will serve for future purposes to guide chiefs as to what they can do or cannot do when it comes to these matters. So there should be some kind of mechanism by which the erring one should be somehow brought to book. It is not impossible, not necessarily punishment or as we understand it, but there are various ways by which you can you can discipline your own people. So those are some of the thoughts that have come up, and we should be following through and see what happens.
Okay, we are grateful. Togbito Prehodo IV, that's the Paramount Chief of the Amfuega Traditional Area. I must declare, that's my Paramount Chief as well. Thank you so much for joining us. He's the President of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs. We have to let him go because he's unable to stay with us through it all. But thank you for that intervention there. We also have Professor Kofi Ejekum, Linguistics and Politics Expert at the University of Ghana, and Dr. Kwame Asasante, also Senior Lecturer, Department of Political Science and Director, Center for Europe European Studies, University of Ghana, also with us via Zoom. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of the show once again. So let me come to you, Dr. Kwame Asante, and then we'll get to Professor Kofi Ejekom. He's joining us via phone as well. So, Dr. Asante, you have been monitoring this, at least we've been interacting with you on various levels when it comes to this particular issue. But now that the Supreme Court has given this particular judgment or ruling, would you say that it provides that clarity that we've always been looking for?
Yes, as you rightly said, this call has been on for a very long time. If you read the Constitutional Review Committee report, particularly page 534, after the work of the commission, one of the recommendations that the commission made was to encourage that they were looking forward to a day that phrase in the Constitution, active party politics, will be defined by the Constitution. Thank God, our Supreme Court has lived up to the expectation. They've come out with an interpretation, and that's what we are looking at. A good one. It is commendable because if you look at the terrain that they walk through, it's a very difficult one, because if you look at it from the point of view of politics, what constitutes politics and partisan politics, a very difficult concept and so broad. So for them to walk that tightrope, I commend them. And then at least they come up with something that will guide the conduct of those who want to be in politics. And then those who are chiefs and the activities once a while, take them into the arena of politics. There is no doubt that the Supreme Court did a very thorough work. If you look at the cases they cited, going into some of the authorities, Maxwell Owusu and Professor Yanka, the work that they read, elaborate program. It's a good one that they did. It gives us at least something for us to start with. Normally, judgments will help us to appreciate a situation and be able to deal with a problem that is on hand. But as society changes, you realize that sometimes we need to go back to the court again and then see if there are other problems. What I see is that there's no doubt that the judgment has done something that is in line with the Constitutional Review Committee report, and it's also is in line with the call by a lot of people that live in this country. They are worried about that because chiefs are the pivot around which our traditional system revolves. They are supposed to be neutral and handle affairs in such a manner that they don't lose their authority in the eyes of everybody within the locality. So we expect them to live above reproach as far as partisan politics is concerned, because of the danger of them meddling in politics and dividing their society and the rest of them. Well, but if you look at the ruling, yes, the Supreme Court has ruled. But looking at where I sit, I can also see that one day we may also go to the Supreme Court again for another interpretation.
For which particular part?
Yeah, if you look at now, the court is saying that, yes, if you come out with plain endorsement of any candidate, that is wrong. All right. But in politics, actions are also part of political definition. All right. And then even gestures are also part. And then let me start with issue of what? Praises and condemnation. Right? Yes, I can praise a government. I can criticize a government. It's part of politics. It's political. The way I do it, sometimes I can praise a government to the extent that there is a tacit support for that candidate. Let me give you something that I've scribbled down. If that one happens to be come out with the mouth of a chief, saying that your government is the first to have given us road, potable water, and electricity.
Exactly.
I and my people will never forget this gesture.
Is that not an endorsement? Is that not an endorsement?
Is it endorsement? I am praising. I said, I acknowledge the fact that that government has given us road, water, and has given electricity. It's the first time we have seen that in our area. Me, as a chief, and my people will never forget this. I have not endorsed anybody, but I am supporting a policy that the government has done, which is very good. I am lauding a policy. Would you say that I have, partake in active partisan politics? Another difficulty I foresee. Another one is that sometimes you realize that non-verbal communication is also critical in political balance. I can decide not to even say anything, but a little word or two, and then I end up with a gesture of a political party. Does it mean I am in support of that party? I've endorsed the party. A gesture like we are moving forward. All right?
And the other sign they make
and
as well.
And the other gestures. They are critical in political communication. So how do you explain them? Is it the case that I have endorsed?
Okay. Well, let me bring in...
No.
Okay.
The good aspect of the ruling is that it has brought us to be thinking about these things and then policing the system and helping us. All right? So it's a good thing. My also issue is that are there any sanctions if a chief crosses the line?
That was not provided for.
Yeah, because all of us have to make sure that we police the system and let it work. It is in our own interest. The Supreme Court has finished its bit. We have to support the court for this law to support every member of the community. How do we do? We have to be vigilant. After all, vigilance is the price of liberty.
We'll come to what we all have to do.
Anybody who crosses the line, what are the sanctions for that person? Because remember, chiefs are powerful people.
Yes,
they cross the line.
That's something we need to get into, Doc. Doc, we'll get into that shortly. We'll get into that bit shortly, what we all have to do to ensure that there are no violations of the Constitution going forward, since we all agree that some clarity has been provided. Professor Kofi Ojekum is on phone. So this issue, at least, I don't know if you also agree that clarity that we needed, because there was more cryptic, it was ambiguous and unclear at the beginning before this case, before this judgment we got on Friday. You also agree that that clarity has been provided? Then I can ask you about the other issues that are coming up.
Okay, thank you very much. You introduced me as a professor of linguistics. That was right, but I'm not in politics.
Okay. Thank you.
So we leave the political science to Dr. Francis.
I will do that. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's very, very clear. And we shouldn't have even waited for this matter to have been sent to court for a judgment to be made. It should have been clear to our chief. Because if you look at the role of our chief, they are supposed to be very neutral and absolutely neutral. Let me just draw your attention to some of the functions of our chief. Just few of them. They are supposed to be in control of the maintenance of our culture. And if you're going to maintain culture and you've divided your people on partisan lines, where do you start? They are supposed to be the head of governance of the entire jurisdiction. And they are supposed to be the head of the judiciary. So all matters, disputes are sent to the chief palace. So just picture a chief who belongs to Party A, and he's presiding over issues that are affecting parties A and B. How will the other party that is not on the part of the chief feel? So, from the starting point, it is clear that chiefs should move themselves, walk away from anything about politics, If you're a chief and you want to be a politician, yes, tell your people that now I want to put the stool or skin down and I want to be in politics. Then you can do that. Insofar as you are the occupant of the stool or the skin, please move away from this partisan. Well, the moment you say, I and my people will support your candidature, you're rightly saying that, okay, then those who are not supporting this kind of politician are becoming my enemies. So if you are the head of the security of the place, you are the commander-in-chief. Next time, if you want to rally them to be behind you, to go to fight in those days, will they be ready? Will all of them be ready? Mm-hmm. No. The chief is also the spiritual leader of the people. And you are supposed to take care of all the spiritual needs of your people. How do you do this when you have divided your state into two? You are also supposed to protect the symbol of your office. So if you align all these together, then I think I support the judgment that our chief should walk away from partisan politics and then refuse the state of supporting candidate A and not candidate B. That's what I see.
Okay, but to the extent that this is actually not new, it was stipulated in the Constitution, yet we've had chiefs doing this. But this, now that you also agree that this clarity has been provided, now it's the implementation that we are all looking forward to. But the court, however, gives the chief or the agents of change, which you've given us all that they are supposed to be doing, they are allowed now to laud the policies. Or they can praise, they can criticize the government. But you've been hearing Dr. Asante on this. There are gestures. Yes. There are other things that can be done that people can interpret as an endorsement as well. Because if you are lauding a particular policy and you say that your people will never forget you for doing this for us, by an extension, could that not pass as an endorsement? The issue about implementation now comes into question.
Most of these are part of communication and then language. What Dr. Assad said, that I love your policy, we will never forget you. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean that all the people in that village or town are going to vote and block for this candidate. No. So
but if our head, you've talked about all that they mean to us as chiefs, all that they mean to us as a people. If they tell us that this is what you've done for us, until you came, we haven't seen electricity, we haven't seen good roads, and for that cause, we will never forget you. And this is an election season, it's a campaign season. What would that mean?
About two minutes, it could be ambiguous. It could mean that, yes, we see what you've done for us. We may vote for you. It's also possible that we know what you have done for us, and that will not mean that we are going to vote for you. But as Dr. Assad said, we should also be mindful of our non-verbal communication. So if at the day when the chief is meeting this candidate, and then the chief comes out wearing something, the colors of which is closer to that party, then people can read meanings into all these. Mm-hmm. So we will advise our chief that neutrality is cardinal. 2, they are all based on the principle of sincerity. They should be sincere to themselves. That as a chief, I have every right to say, I wish you the best in your campaign. Then tomorrow another candidate also comes. I'll say the same. So if I have told 10 politicians that I wish you the best in your campaign, does it mean that I'm supporting one of them? No, I'm not. Mm-hmm. And I should also be ready as a chief to meet every politician who comes to my area. Because if I meet politician A, B, C, and the next time I hear D is coming, and I tell my people, I'm so busy, I'm traveling, I'm not even appointing somebody to represent me, That will give signals that I don't like that person. And people can read many things into this.
Okay.
So as chiefs, we should be very cautious. I know they know, but going forward, and more so when 2024 is just knocking at our door, as chiefs, we shouldn't be doing things that will give the people opportunity to be pointing fingers at us. That's what I think. Okay,
please stay with me. We'll take a look at how, going forward, chiefs ought to maneuver this such that we won't have them endorsing. But we have Kujo Apejie joining us also. He's an associate professor, School of Law, University of Ghana, Legon. Thank you so much for joining us also via Zoom. You were busy in court last week also on another case that I'm sure before we wrap up we can talk about briefly. But let's focus on chiefs and partisan politics. Well, we've been through this. There's been constitutional review touched on it. I've seen copies of it where they talk about, the review of this particular, Act 276 Clause 1 amongst others. We are back again on this. The Constitution was clear, but it appears that we had chiefs still doing what they thought they could do best when it comes to endorsement of candidates. For what you've seen, I'm sure you've been reading this, have we been left with a more cryptic, ambiguous and unclear directive or otherwise, you'd say?
Thank you very, very much for having me, Emefa. I think that, for me, my position about, or my reaction to the Article 276(2) of the Constitution is about the fact that I think we have to look at the active politics in two spheres. In one sense, the chiefs themselves becoming politically active in the sense of vying for political office. And the other part is where they align themselves or dissociate themselves from a particular political party for one reason or the other. For me, in the first scenario, I disagree or I don't endorse the position as found in the Constitution. But in the second part where they say don't take part in active politics based on a decision of the court, I agree with that. So the discussion as we're having it now is based on the second scenario. And my view is that that should be the case because there is a saying in the tree, a proverb that that the chief, when he makes the final decision, is final. You cannot more or less challenge it. So where the chief is seen to be active politically in terms of endorsing a candidate or endorsing a particular political party, I think there's a possibility of influencing who a citizen of that community should vote for and how that person or how that vote should be made. And so in that respect, I respect the decision of the Supreme Court. However, as Dr. Asan Asante has said, I think it's a question of whether if I praise a chief or if I commend a chief or if I criticize a particular policy, how it can be viewed, it can be subtle, and it can lend itself to being considered as a form of endorsement. And so it's not really clear as how we can properly define the boundaries to say that this is praise, and this is allowed under the Constitution, this is endorsement, and this is not allowed.
Well, but the other bit that I'm also struggling with is whether they do this publicly or privately. Where then do they fall foul of the law? Because if they do it privately, we would never know. Most people would never know that they are endorsing. But it's only when it's done publicly. Is that the case?
Yes, I think if they do it privately, that is fine. Okay. Because everybody is considered a political animal, and everybody has a right to vote
anyway.
This way or that way. So if that view is expressed privately, and it relates to a particular political party, for or against that political party, I don't think we should have any qualms with that. It is when it is made publicly, particularly during debates where they welcome political parties to their communities and so on, and they shower all the praises on them and say that we are going to vote for you this way or that way, or they refuse to welcome other political parties, or the kind of reception that other political parties receive are cold compared to what the others receive, then we have a situation where you can infer there is endorsement. And that's, as I said, can influence the members of that particular ethnic group votes, and therefore that can be problematic.
Okay, but you're a lawyer, so maybe you can help us with this. There's been the issue about gestures that Dr. Asante has been talking about. At least we've seen all the various gestures that are done during active political campaigning season. For now, even if you do it, it means something else. But if the chief does not say it, does not openly say that I'm endorsing this particular candidate, but however, makes a certain gesture, does that violate the law?
Well, I mean, this discussion falls into the realm of freedom of expression.
Which which the courts upholds, that, yeah, they have that freedom of expression as well.
Yes. They have the freedom of expression, all right. And the expression can be done in various ways, including gestures. So I don't think that we should be too fixated on whether it is a gesture or whether it is a verbal pronouncement or any other way of expressing yourself. We can read into the meaning of what a gesture is and what a verbal expression is. And so at the end of the day, that we can get the message clear that this chief or traditional leader is endorsing this political party or not. Where to draw the line is very tricky, because, like we're saying, a praise can amount to an endorsement. An endorsement can also be in a form of a praise. And so that is the difficulty we fall into. And I don't know whether and what kind of policeman or which other checks that we're going to put in place to ensure that this person is found culpable. And if found so, what should happen to that chief for showing those gestures or expression in any way which seems to endorse one political party or the other.
Okay, well, we'll talk about how we are going to walk this thin line going forward, since 2024 is just around the corner. Issues about implementation and whether we would be heading back to the Supreme Court at some point after election 2024. Let me bring in Mr. Safo Kantanka. He's a monarchical historian. He works with the chiefs a lot, also in that regard, and will share a few thoughts with us as well. He joins us via phone. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that you've been looking at this particular judgment from the Supreme Court. There are those who say that this is really nothing new. It's been in the Constitution, yet we've seen what we've seen in terms of the endorsement and all kinds of things happening with these chiefs when it comes to active political campaigning. Do you think anything will change with this particular ruling? Mr. Kantanka.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us. I don't know if you heard me. I'm asking that I'm sure you've seen this latest Supreme Court ruling, and whether it would change anything when it comes to active politics, endorsements, amongst others, especially during the height of political campaigning.
Well, I think the Supreme Court stand on chief in general, traditional rulers not taking active part in politics is a sound reason. I think it is a very good idea if the nation stands on its feet that traditional rulers should not get involved in active politics. At the same time, they are saying that they can take part in inactive politics. That is to say, they can offer suggestions and they should stay neutral. Staying neutral is a very significant issue in the sense that they, traditional rulers, belong to both sides. and they belong to all political parties. Their children, their subjects are divided into 2 or 3 or even more, and they don't have to get involved, so much so that they will be seen aligning themselves to one particular group. And we all know how dirty party politics is in this country or in this part of our world. So if we choose align themselves to a particular group, the natural tendency of creating problems within a particular community would be very high. So it is important to make a law, and the law, we should all stand by that law, that chiefs or traditional rulers should not get involved in active politics. They shouldn't. But at the same time, it must be made clear that the law is not saying that chiefs should not talk politics at all.
Okay.
They should. But in the form of advice, and then try modestly to stand in the middle.
Are they able to talk politics and still stand in the middle? Is that a possibility?
Yes, I think so. Politics is everyday life. Whatever we do, every step that we take in everyday life has something to do with politics. But when we talk of active politics, we are talking about where chiefs have aligned themselves to a particular party, showering praises upon parties and then pulling the leg of the other party. And that is where the danger is. But if a political party has done very well, and we are saying that, okay, when you came, our road was bad, but you have fixed the road, and then we thank you for fixing the road. I don't think we'll be doing any disservice if we do that. The danger is having praised them after all the praises, we should not be tempted. Nananum should not be tempted to go overboard by maybe exaggerating the praises they are showing on the political party.
Okay. Well,
and every other party that comes should be welcome to their policies.
Well,
I think that they are doing exactly so.
Okay. Well, let me come to Dr. Asante on this. You raised the issue about the possibility of us maybe going back to the Supreme Court after it all. Do you not see this ruling in particular as deterrent enough? Do you reckon that we shall see less endorsement and more praises instead going forward, such that we may not have anyone going back to the Supreme Court for further interpretation, since there is no, punitive measures, at least when it comes to this particular one?
If we want to make sure that the law works, it will work. But
How?
If we want to undermine the law, we will also be able to do that. Why am I saying this? Because in politics, if you study political science, there are scholars, Donovan and Co., who said that politics deals with manipulation. So, yes, the Supreme Court has given a very beautiful ruling, but this thing can be manipulated in such a way that you will struggle to find that clear line that really takes them to the realm of the breach of the law. So manipulation is another aspect of it which creates a difficulty for us. All right. So one surest way is that if we get a certain standard that this is how it is, and these are the sanctions when you cross the line, the sanction regime will restrain people a lot. Let us remember that the people we are dealing with are chiefs. They are the most powerful people in our society. If they cross the line, how do you take them on? They are so powerful. Their people around them will come at you and all that. All manner of interpretations can be brought to bear, and that to justify what the chief did and all that. Let us also not forget that it's not only praise. You can even criticize a government consistently, and it can be misconstrued to mean that, look, you are indulging in politics. How do you also define that? And let us also remember that people talk about, being political and being neutral. If you are a subject officer, remember that some of the chiefs are political scientists, they have knowledge in politics, and they speak. It doesn't matter who is the recipient of whatever they say, all right? They speak, if they are subject officer, they will speak. When they speak, and consistently it attacks a regime or the other, how is the society going to look at that one? It's a very, interesting situation we find ourselves. But the good news is that the Supreme Court has given us something to work with. If there are problems, that is why the court is there. We always rush to them, and then they come out with something that supports society. So I believe that it is something that is a good thing. Let us work with it, and let our society be vigilant, so that we make sure that these chiefs that we hail and praise all the time, they will do the right thing. But I believe going forward, the way out to make sure that these things work is that we can tie it to the issue of what hate speeches that people give during election time and all that. Why don't we have a body that is neutral of political parties that will monitor the political scene during campaign, and that anybody who comes out with hate speech or endorse a candidate, whether you achieve or not, and if you achieve and you endorse a candidate and you cross the lines, we will name you, shame you, and then make sure that we respect the ruling. And this is the only way out, because once you don't have sanction regime that accompanies this, we have to come in and create a situation that will, act very well for all of us.
Let me bring in Opinye Jekum on this sanctions regime. But I'm wondering, really, should we not leave the chiefs out of the public active campaigning season? I know that as part of tradition, when they go into a particular area, I mean the politicians, they'll have to call on the chiefs amongst others. Can that not be done privately, or it has to always be done the way that we see it with all the pomp and pageantry?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear your opinion.
Yes. It will be very difficult for politicians to go onto the land of the chiefs and then refuse to go and greet them and start campaigning.
I admitted that they have to see them. I know they need to call on them as part of tradition. But we always see that it's done with the huge derbers amongst others where they ought to speak. And once the chiefs see their people, they become also charged and say the things that they say.
Okay. So, see, when we look at the status of a chief, they are supposed to be the first among equals. And therefore, the caliber of chiefs we should have will depict how they put themselves in the public domain. So for me, what I think is that our chiefs should start evaluating themselves. Do we want to call our people to order when they misbehave? I think they will say yes. Yes. Do we ourselves, should we misbehave and go contrary to what is stipulated in the Constitution? If the answer is yes, then we are in danger. But if the answer is no, then the chiefs themselves, without apology, should start comporting themselves.
Okay.
How can they do that? It will be the duty of the regional House of Chiefs, for me, for them to organize some kind of workshops and continue to remind our chiefs of their status when it comes to campaigns and the political scene. That's one way. We shouldn't also forget that the chief is in charge of the environment, the communal labor, everything is supposed to be engineered by them. What happens if the people see that our team belongs to Part A, and then he beats the village gong that we are going to do ABC? Well, all the people will be ready to go. They won't go. That will be rising up against the chief. And I don't think any chief will be ready to entertain such things. So my appeal will be for the chiefs to know who they are, the positions they occupy, and their positions are not only for the living, they are occupying the positions as intermediary between even the living, the ancestors. So if they know that, they will plead with them that they should refrain from doing things that will go contrary to this reading and then what is stated in the Constitution.
Okay.
I think that would be a way forward. And the National Peace Council can also come in to help us by engaging the peace, especially moving to 2024.
Okay.
Counseling like this, I don't know how we are going to do that.
Because they are chiefs and it will be difficult for that to be done?
Very, very difficult. So the chiefs shouldn't allow themselves to be pushed into the picture for any function to be proposed against them.
Okay.
That will not be the best.
Okay. Professor Appiah-Adjetua, I'll come to you on this. Is it time for some form of sanctions regime to be put in place, maybe at the National House of Chiefs level? How do you reckon that this can be done?
Well, I think the point has been made about the influence or the power that the chiefs wield within their communities. And they need to take that into account because the chiefs' powers have been eroded so much in a lot of ways. And what is left for them is something that they hold dearly up to. However, we see a situation where politicians still try to use chiefs as tools, if I can put it bluntly, in the way as to achieve their political objectives. Similar to what happened during the colonial rule when chiefs were used for indirect rule. In terms of proposing sanctions, I think it's going to further erode the powers of the chiefs. And I'm not sure their people would sit by for that to happen. And it also talks about the fact that chiefs, what they do is also part of politics. And looking at how our democracy is not something that aligns with our traditional political systems, it creates a sort of dichotomy where we have the Western democracy that we are practicing on the one hand, and then the traditional democracy on the other hand, which is being sidelined and denigrated. So I think that to impose sanctions in that regard will be an affront to our traditional political systems, which rather should be given the needed encouragement and boost, and there should be a good blend of the traditional with the modern. And so I think that is why in my initial comments I made a point that active politics in terms of the chiefs being allowed to vie for political office, I'm opposed to that because I think that there should be that opportunity for us to redefine the contours of our democracy in order to bring the chiefs more into the picture. In the 1957 Constitution, the Independence Constitution, the chiefs were given a more prominent role to play. Unfortunately, when the country was turned into a one-party rule in the 1960s, those powers began to be eroded. Yeah. And since then, the constitutions have always said chiefs should not play any active politics. So bottom line, we should find a way to draw the balance so that the chiefs should have their roles respected, and they should not be pushed into making decisions. Of course, the chiefs are also trying to make sure that development comes into their community and so on. That is why they try to support one political party or another. However, on the other hand, some chiefs are also do this from a selfish point of view to get their own personal interests satisfied, and that is where they shouldn't go. So in trying to draw the line, we should look at these things so that we will not say we are imposing sanctions on the chiefs for trying to engage in some form of politics.
But if we say this, Professor Apawu, I wonder, yes, they are powerful and all. We recognize the role they play in the society, but they are not above the law, are they?
Well, definitely they are not above the law. But we also need to realize that in the traditional political system or in our traditional beliefs, we try to accord special respect to certain people who hold certain offices. Mm-hmm. And the same way in our modern political democracy, we have immunities for presidents and so on. So these people are entitled to some privileges to be able to enable them to perform their functions. And so just as the same as the president is not above the law, the chief should also not be above the law. But there should be some room which will enable the chief to properly perform his or her functions for the good of the community that they exercise their chiefly authorities.
Okay. Well, let me give the final word to Mr. Safo-Kantanka on this, appropriately so. I'm wondering, going forward, how are we hoping that the chiefs themselves will put themselves in check such that we know they are powerful and all, but really not above the law? How are we hoping? Should there be sanctions? How exactly should we be maneuvering this?
I think the position of the chief, as far as politics is concerned, is well defined. The definition is that they should stay neutral. And then if they go beyond being neutral, I think they have to be brought to the line. And it is not difficult to advise or maybe draw the attention of the chief to stop where they're going wrong. Now, if you look at their position, of course, it is very clear that when they have stepped out of bounds, they have to be brought to their track. And we should not forget the fact that they have some privileges, or they must be given some privileges. Privileges are all over the world, and it will not be anything strange if we have to give our chiefs or traditional rulers some privileges in terms of dealing with them when they have made a mistake.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is how we have to look at how to handle them when they make mistakes. We have to look at some privileges, look at privileges. They should be given privileges, but not to be above law.
Okay. We appreciate your time. That's Mr. Safo-Kantanka, a monarchical historian. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that we've just started a discussion the entire week where I'm sure we'll get to focus on this particular issue once again, whether it's time for a proper review. I wanted to take Professor Apawu as the take on this, but we're really out of time on this one, and we'll continue the discussion. We also had via phone Professor Kofi Ejekum, linguistics professor at the University of Ghana, joining us. We had Togbi Teprehodo IV, the paramount chief of our Fuega traditional area and president of the Volta Regional House of Chiefs, joining us via phone. Also, Professor Kweju Apawu, School of Law, University of Ghana. Also, Dr. Kwame Asasante, senior lecturer, Department of Political Science and Director, Center for European Studies, University of Ghana, Legon. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of tonight's edition of The Probe. For our radio audience, we have A Walk with Jesus, and for TV, we have Prime Take with Motao Nabila. On behalf of the entire team, many thanks for being a part of The Probe. I am Emefa Apawu. There's more when you log on to myjournalline.com. Have a good evening.